Today, September 30, is the memorial of Saint Jerome, Doctor of the Church. Today's saint was living in Antioch in the 370s when he had a vision. Jerome was standing in the presence of the seated Christ, who asked him who he was. "I am a Christian," Jerome responded. "Liar," Jesus yelled. "You are a Ciceronian, not a Christian, for where your treasure is, there also is your heart." Jerome indeed loved Cicero and other Latin stylists. Their works and fine prose gave him the greatest pleasure. But Jerome had also been reared in a Christian home, been baptized as an adult in Rome, and have frequently descended into the darkened catacombs to pray at the tombs of the martyrs and saints. His double identity as both a scholar of Latin and Greek rhetoric on the one hand, and as a committed Christian on the other hand, dwelled within him. Jerome fervently loved God and the Catholic religion with all his soul, but it was a troubled soul. Jerome was full of spit and vinegar. He was a complex man and a complex saint. Saint Jerome was born in an unknown year in a region northeast of Venice, Italy. His father sent him as a young man to Rome to perfect his education under a famous tutor. Jerome was a superb student and mastered Latin and Greek. At about the age of 30, he decided to become a monk and traveled to the desert of Syria. For 4 years, he lived a life of austerity, penance, and isolation. He fasted from the classics he loved so much and instead studied Hebrew from a Jewish convert. When he finally came out of the desert, he was ordained a priest in Antioch, but never truly exercised his priestly ministry. He studied under the great Saint Gregory Nazianzen in Constantinople and began to publish some translations and biblical commentaries. Around 382, Jerome went to Rome with his bishop to serve as an interpreter and aide. Jerome impressed Pope Saint Damasus, who asked him to be his secretary. At this point in his 40s, and while living in Rome, Jerome began the monumental task of translating the entire Bible into Latin from original Greek and Hebrew texts. It would take him years. The existing Old Latin Bible was not cohesive, but a jumble of texts stitched together under one cover. Various scholars had generated divergent translations for purely local use. So the Gospel of John, in the Jerusalem-based manuscript, differed from the same Gospel in a manuscript in Gaul. The one church, spread throughout the known world, needed one Bible to match its broad scope and theological unity. Jerome was the man for the job. After just a few years in Rome, after the death of his patron Pope Damasus, and due to the enemies, his blunt words and fiery temper always seemed to create, Jerome left Rome for the Holy Land. He lived in a cave near Bethlehem and focused on translating. Some holy and pious women from Rome followed him there and formed a quasi-monastic community around him. Jerome's translation, known as the Vulgate, became the standard Latin version of the Bible over time, pushing the old Latin version into oblivion. The Council of Trent formally stated that the Vulgate was the official Bible of the Catholic Church. So, Catholicism has a Bible, a claim which no other church can make. Know the Bible, overfloated down from heaven on the golden pillow. Except for Jerome's, the Bible doesn't exist. There are thousands of ancient scraps of scriptures from the hundreds of ancient texts from scores of libraries and monasteries in dozens of countries. But the publisher and its consultants ultimately choose which text to include in any published Bible and which to include. Catholicism has no such flimsy process. Its sacred word is not dependent on the scholarly fashion and whim. It has a baseline. The Vulgate is like a drop anchor resting on the ocean floor. It keeps the ship of the church from drifting. Catholicism is a religion of the word more than of the book, but it has a definitive book nonetheless. The fiery Saint Jerome died peacefully in 420, exhausted from his scholarly labors and life of penance. His remains can be found directly below the high altar of Saint Mary Major Basilica in Rome, in a handsome porphyry sarcophagus. Let us pray. Saint Jerome, you lived a life dedicated to studying the Word of God, to penance, and to prayer. You place your knowledge and scholarly gifts at the service of the Church, which use them wisely. Help all the faithful to serve the Church as much as the Church serves them. Amen.